Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is Feb 14, 2024. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. Hey, he's a Canadian. And we want to thank Doug Harvey for introducing me to today's guest, John Lohbado. Higham. John, where in the heck you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Montreal.
How cool is that? The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
To relax, to not be stressed and anxious and depressed, just to be relaxed. And
That is great. I agree with you 100%. What's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
reading, because it's straight to the point, and when people talk a lot, it puts me to sleep. And I can gather an hour's worth of blah blah in just a few minutes through reading.
I agree. Just to divert, did you become a reader, one, because your parents told you to, two, they did it as an example, or three, on your own?
On my own, because I was seduced by the magic of books from a very early age. One of my vivid memories is when my mother introduced me around the age of 4 to Mother Goose, and it was such a mind blowing experience, and I felt so intimate connection with my mother and with the illustrations and Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, and all this stuff. And now it's just gone full steam. Now I'm into Finnegan's Wake. That's how the great fall of the off wall in Finnegan's Wake. So uh, I've always, there's just a total electric magic that I got right from the start with reading. And then going to the library I was in paradise. I used to skip school to sit and read in the library.
Amazing. I'm totally a library person. We got a lot in common. Thank you. So, why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Because they want to know, as they say in Jesus Christ Superstar, what's that buzz? Tell me what's happening. What's that buzz? I only want to know to
That's
try to make
good.
sense of things. Try to make sense of things.
Yeah. And do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I think it's innate, and I got this idea because I was a stay-at-home father with my younger daughter for 6 years, and or almost 7 years, and I used to watch her when I had this idea. We were in a playground one day downtown Montreal at McGill University, and she would run to the fence. Like, she had all this greenery and play stuff, but she would want to go to the fence, to the edge, and then try to squeeze through the bars, because it's this. And I think this is a primal urge to go beyond limitation. And
To
she,
go,
yeah.
what a great observation. And that's all we're sort of trained by parents and authority is draw within the lines,
Yeah,
don't draw outside the lines.
yeah. No, I was a bad influence on her because now she's in the arts, and so I told her, "Don't do what I do.
She's
Study
in,
business like your mom. Don't be like me, because then you'll always be low income. And
do thoughts create emotions?
I think emotions are a form of thought.
Yeah.
That it's just thoughts is a very interesting subject. There's yeah. So usually when you're angry, you think, I am angry. Or when you're in love, you think, oh, wow, look at her. I really want her. So there's always this. Again, what is an emotion? Yeah, it's a biological reaction to some messages going on in the brain, I guess.
Yeah.
And,
Phil,
and, and I got disillusioned with emotions anyway, because a lot of them are just, if you relax, they just sort of dissolve. You relax your mind through meditation, and then suddenly this, and this, oh, what was I all upset about?
yeah. Yeah, really good. Fill in the blank, John. I don't know what I think until I.
Until I'm in the situation and I'm being challenged or surprised,
Yeah.
and then some instinct tells me what to do. I don't even think, what do I do? I just do it.
Instinct. That's really good. And so McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion said, I don't know what I think until I write it. So
Mhm.
that's good. Challenged and surprise, instinct. Those are great words. So Chomsky says a language is not just words, it's a culture, it's a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. John, what do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Well, that happened when I was married, and I have to, and your wife says we got to communicate, and then that's when language breaks down because you say, "Oh my God, this is serious. What's going on here? We got to communicate. There's something between the lines there. It's not exactly what she's saying. It's some kind of inner frustration and all kinds of aggression and whatever's going on." And so that's when sometimes the words aren't going to do the trick. Sometimes you may have to touch her, or the tone of voice, or something
Yeah.
along the, or the way you look at her, your body language.
Yep. Touch, body language. Yep. Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I think we're more feeling beings, especially if you look at the political state. People are just going by primitive, subconscious reactions, or the way people react when they're at a Taylor Swift concert, this huge religious uh, ecstasy that happens through being in a crowd. So it's not thought, it's just feelings.
Yeah. These are two questions from Alan Turing, 1950s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
Well, what exactly is the soul? What does he mean by soul?
Yeah, well, I think it's back to like your word instinct. There's Lily Tomlin says reality is just a collective hunch. So it's sort of like your guess or hunch, what most people think is the soul, is thinking a function of that.
I'm totally the word, because I was have a religious background. I was born into a religious household, and I heard these words, soul and Holy Ghost, and all this stuff, and I would roll my eyes, and so I don't know what to make of the word soul. So,
Yeah, that's all right. The
but
second,
thinking, what were you saying? You were saying
well, it's just like
thinking is a function of soul.
well, that's what he's asking. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Thinking for me is a mystery.
Right,
Again,
good.
I got this from everything that's in my head. I absorbed, and it's through my social biological conditioning, where I was, what I experienced. I spent time at the San Francisco Zen Center, Minneapolis Zen Center, and so that where you learn how to look at your mind and watch thoughts come and go, when you wonder, oh geez, where do these thoughts come from? And you realize I'm not in control of my thoughts. I don't decide what my next thought is going to be. It's they're just rushing in.
That's really interesting because Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. And I'm like, good luck. And then people meditate, and you might know this, they say, think about not thinking.
I would say that's a form of thinking.
That is a form. That's what I'm saying. That is a form of thinking. Yeah. So the second Turing question is, can machines think?
No, that's like if you listen to Searle and his talks, he would say, no, machines don't think. They just have a set of mechanical procedures. He had this little, I forget this little thing about imagine someone in the Chinese room experiment with somebody sitting in a room, and you slip a little slip of paper, and then the person looks it up in their little encyclopedia or dictionary and gives the appropriate reply. So is there any thought going on? No, it's just, yeah.
Yeah. And Searle is, I'm not sure who is that, or is that a
Oh,
philosopher?
I shouldn't. I don't. I'm not. I shouldn't do name dropping. He's just a philosopher. I think he recently died. A philosopher of. He wrote a book called Speech Acts. That was his first famous book, and and some funny, entertaining books about communication and language and stuff.
Oh, that's good. And is it spelled S or C?
Searle. He's on YouTube. They have his talks on YouTube. He's
Yeah.
kind of a cranky old guy, but with sort of a, but you just don't pay attention to his political views, and he's fun.
Yeah. Cool. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Well, meaning comes with happiness, because if you have an idea, well, what meaning for me means having a sense of purpose and some sort of understanding that, so that you don't feel claustrophobic or overwhelmed, or that things are just upside down and ready to explode. So meaning is sort of like a thread through the labyrinth of existence. And yeah, so that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I got the question from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says, meaning tends to last and happiness doesn't necessarily last. So, does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
No, we're just detecting it. We don't create anything other than if I'm making a sculpture out of material, but consciousness just happens.
What's faster, the speed of light or speed of thought?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, thoughts are just impossible. It's if you sit there just for fun doing a long meditation routine and you try to detect the beginning of a thought, good luck. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
and yeah, so it's a question. I don't know. You know.
Yeah. No, it's totally fine to say, I don't know. I can't answer that.
Yeah.
Really good. And so Audre Lorde, the poet, said, you can dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded to her and said, yes, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
If you want to take apart the master's house.
Yeah, and again, let me just reiterate, you put the questions into the context you want. I opened some of these questions with cue quotes. It doesn't mean you have to apply them. The
Yeah.
basic question is, and you put it into the words you want. The basic question is, what tool do you gravitate towards? You can add the word new if you want, and you can add the context of saying in dismantling the master's house if you want.
Well, if I just does it make sense or not? Is the master's house for real? Is it genuine? Is it just a facade to try to push a certain agenda? Is the guy there because he wants to manipulate you or have power over you? Is the master there in order to intimidate you and control you? And then if you examine the master's intentions, that's a way of deflating him or taking him apart so that he has less power over you. That would, I think of the master is someone who's trying to control me and dominate me and manipulate me. And the tool for taking that apart is to try to understand where he's coming from. And then you see what the motivations are, and then it's not so scary, and then the guy starts to look just like pretty pathetic. There's nothing more pathetic than someone who wants to control you. So there's nothing more pathetic in a sense than a master.
Wow, that covers a lot of what we're going to cover, because that's actually McLuhan's main thing, is understanding relationships. Yeah, critical thinking is what you described there too. Understanding, critical thinking, put it into context. What new toy do you suggest?
A toy for which purpose?
Yeah, for again, you put it in the context you want. It was interesting because I always ask this question about what new tool do you suggest, and someone goes, well, I can suggest a new toy. So then I just added it and piggybacked it, like, well, after you tell me your toy, what new tool, what after you tell me your tool,
All right.
then
The best,
yeah,
okay.
go ahead.
Best tool is a psychological tool of humor. If you want to deflate
Yeah,
somebody or
yeah,
remove their authority, the worst thing for someone like Trump is to laugh at them. That's the one thing that
yeah.
gets under the skin.
You're right. It's good. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I worry about how long I can stay here before something I get evicted or the rent becomes unaffordable.
Yeah. McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, John, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Well, if you get too self-conscious, it's kind of like trying to think about walking and you'll trip over your toes. So it's
Right.
best just to be totally integrated with what you're doing. Or like tightrope walking, if you look down, you're gonna might get vertigo or something. So you just focus on the mechanics of walking on that rope.
It's really good. Do artists have moral obligation?
No, I'm allergic to the word moral just because of my experience with religion and being judgmental, moralistic people getting on their moral high horse, and then you see it now with the anti-abortionists and stuff getting super moralistic and then hypocritical because, okay, I
Yeah.
won't talk politics, but you know what I mean. So I'm allergic to the word because some of the greatest cruelty is performed by people who are attached to their moral principles. The stronger your moral principles, the more capable of cruelty you are.
Wow, that is heavy. A very astute observation. I would agree. Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
I'm afraid of old dogmatic ideas. I love hear new ideas because it's interesting and it stimulates my brain.
Yeah. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Yeah, and I had this in therapy. What was my early memory was being a sense that the world is some kind of a joke when I was like 4, feeling everything was sort of dark and I was with my mother and she handed me a candy and I looked at the candy and I threw it away in the snow because I thought, what's the point in even eating the candy? It just felt, and then she just said, what did you do that for? And then I felt connected to my mother and that made me feel better. Just the fact that I was connected with her. But I felt the sense that it was all bullshit. Everything was bullshit. I guess I couldn't put it into words at the time. But
Wow.
now when I think back, what the hell's going? Why is existence happening? Oh, here's a
Yeah.
candy. I don't want a candy. I want to know why is existence happening. And then with this emotional connection with another human, okay, I feel connected to you. That's good.
Yeah. Amazing. Really well articulated. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I think memory's a lot of fun, so it's a blessing.
Yeah. Tell me
And you
some.
and you can learn from your mistakes and you can make amends and try to improve.
Totally. Tell me someone within your immediate family, then outside your immediate family, just briefly, who had an impact on you, kind of like a role model. And what specifically was that impact?
There were no role models in my family other than role models of what not to be. My older brother, well, I shouldn't talk too much personal stuff, but my older brother was a bully and, a year and a half older. So he was a role and a very, very angry person. So I said, okay, don't be an angry person. Don't be mean because it's not nice to be on the receiving end. And
That's what you learned from him being a bully. That's actually a good example. But outside your immediate family, somebody who had an impact on you, and what was that impact?
I don't know. I've never been a follower of heroes or anything. I guess I could think when I was young, I was really in love with music, rock and roll music, and I collected a lot of records. So I guess, but I never thought of following anybody. No, I never had a role model. Oh, maybe James Joyce was my hero when I discovered him around the age of 17 or 18 and started reading him, and how he would have his notes and walk around with a little notebook writing down everything he heard, and then using that, throwing everything from his notebook into his novels. So yeah, maybe he had an influence on how I looked at the world. Yes. So James Joyce was a role model.
That is,
Yeah.
we're going to get into Joyce. Let's do a few more of these background questions. So you were raised a particular religion. What religion was it?
My dad was a preacher in the United Church of Canada, which is a mix of Presbyterian, Methodist, and Congregationalist. So it's kind of a liberal church. It's not an evangelical church.
Yeah.
It's a socially conscious church. So they had outreach where they tried to help people. So that was a positive part of the church.
Did you check out at, you said you had sort of a revelation, but did you check out at a certain age?
Well, I realized that from an early age that reality kind of cracked open to me sitting there in church from an early age, that it never felt quite right. It always felt almost yeah, just surreal.
Yeah.
And I was trying to think, not almost dissociation. I had a few episodes of dissociation. It was really, really scary. So I brought myself back to reality just by focusing on physical sensations, because it's not pleasant. So when I start getting dissociation, I just, like your glass of water, or just looking at a flower. Or
Do you pray?
no, because I'm a non-theistic. But then on the other hand, I spend a lot of time with aspiration, aspiring to not freak out, to not worry so much, to not be grumpy and angry when I'm going to a family gathering. I say, okay, don't talk too much, don't make nasty wisecracks, stuff like that.
John, if God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I would say, how are you? Here's what would you like to drink?
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
There's evil behavior. I don't think evil exists independently of the behavior, but there's really reprehensible behavior. And that's a complex topic, because I believe in determinism, but determinism is not an excuse. It's just a way of describing it.
Yeah. Well, the question really follow up is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower him.
Yeah.
Coppola says, if he stole from the mob and the samurais, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. A basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, John, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, it depends how you acknowledge them. Like, I acknowledge, for example, a bully, my brother, and I acknowledge that this guy is a bully. It's a toxic relationship, and I'm gonna make a detour around him. And I have sympathy. I don't hate him. I've never once felt hate.
Wow.
I like my brother, and I feel sad that I've put him on some of my YouTube videos. I tried to be nice. I took nice photos of him, did a couple interviews with him, and but it just never works out, because he starts attacking me and stuff, and he's got this resentment towards me, and I don't know. Anyway, so you don't give power. If you get angry at your enemy, you're empowering your enemy. But if you're not angry, okay, I shouldn't get your landlord, for example, don't get mad at your landlord. Just acknowledge that he just wants money and,
Yeah, someone taught me recently, landlord is empowering like tyranny and in colonialism. What you should call them is rent collectors.
exactly.
Because you're giving them power by going and calling them landlord. Like,
Yeah.
it's like that cartoon character, dishonest John. Yeah, But
Yes.
here, John. Here's the follow up: is Nassim Taleb saying games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is.
Mm.
Then my friend said villains don't think they're bad, they want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bateson said, if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, oh, I did something morally and socially wrong? So there's a lot of prompts, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
No. I have been on the receiving end of heavy duty punishment, and I can tell you from someone who has been punished, it does not work. It creates rage and alienation and bitterness and a desire just to be alone and left alone. So it does not, I don't believe in punishment. I believe in consequences. If a person is dangerous, then you have to control them. You can't have a rapist psycho with a gun walking down the street. So you have to do something to control a person. But hitting them with a stick and making them eat dirty water and rotten food, that doesn't do anything. In fact, they said in Norway, treating prisoners with respect is, if your goal is to rehabilitate them, you're better off treating the person with respect.
Yeah. Amazing. You brought up rehabilitation. That's really good. Now, James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, that's a heavy duty question. Could be tackled from many angles. I mean, the most first of all, just the traditional answer is Aristotle says, theater is catharsis. It's a collective working out of things. But on my personal level, I like telling stories and reading stories because, in a sense, it's interconnected with philosophy, because you learn about empathy, you learn about human nature, you learn about society. You can have satire. You can say truth about corruption. Like, it's interesting reading, say, Gogol or who wrote Dead Souls, and he wants to criticize the society, but he in one of his stories, he says, I'll just pretend it's some department that I was working for, but I can't say what department because I don't want to get sent to the gulag. But that sort of, so you can do all these cool things through fiction, stories, whatever.
Yeah. In fact, experimental filmmaker Hollis Frampton said, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Can you forget to die?
No, I think of death every day because, well, I've seen death. I've seen dead bodies. I did witnessed 4 autopsies. I was there studying, and my parents both died. My mother died at the age of 50 and my father at the age of 66. So I think about death every day as a wake-up call to not waste your time on bullshit, to basically realize that I could die in 5 minutes or in an hour or tomorrow or in 10 years. Who knows? Don't waste time. Don't be silly. Don't do something treat every day like it's your last day.
Yeah. John, do you think longevity is more DNA or more lifestyle choice? I know it's both and it's integrated, but you're sort of hunch.
My hunch is that DNA is the ultimate card, but you can improve a lousy DNA. Like I have a lousy DNA. All the men in my family died young of heart attacks in their 50s and 60s. But with a healthy lifestyle of eating proper and exercise, you can make a difference, and not being miserable, like your state of mind. If you're worried all the time with hypertension, that's not good.
That's like Frank Zappa says, I'm a failure, but I'm not a miserable failure.
There you go. So enjoy being a failure. Oh, I don't. I love Zappa. I collected a lot of his records when I was a kid.
Yeah. But it's interesting because you think your Zen practice has helped you live a longer life.
I never thought of it as a longer life, but it's definitely helped me. I took a year off when my dad died. It was like a break in my life. So I took a year and I lived at a meditation center in Vermont, and which practiced sort of similar to Zen. It was a Tibetan Vajrayana meditation center. But it definitely was a powerful year. I spent a whole 12 months, and it was very, very powerful in changing, rearranging my brain a little bit, making me a little, maybe less neurotic, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, walk us through, John, your tipping points. Basically your callings were artist, educator, and then sight and sound experimental videography. So what was your tipping point? When did you grow up going to art museums or studying art history and go, that's what I want to be? When did you first kind of say, oh, that I'm sort of interested in pursuing art as a calling?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I dropped educator from that. That was a day job. It's just, I don't have a teaching degree. I just was desperate for money, and
Okay.
yeah, and they needed people in the Arctic. So that was just one. I was an addictions counselor for 4 years. I was a house painter. I was a maintenance man.
Yeah. So you've had a lot of jobs, but I'm saying more your overall.
Okay, yeah, to answer this question, yes.
Yeah, you're more your overall calling. I mean, Doug
My
Harvey.
calling has always been clear, is to be an artist, to make pictures, because right from the start, I started out with watercolors and then graduated to oils and acrylics. So I always had an art studio right from early childhood, right till I got married and couldn't afford a studio anymore. So then I started writing and telling stories, and then got more into music. And now digital art is a wonderful thing because you can translate all your painting skills using software on your computer. You just have to get over this uptightness that says, oh, isn't that cheating? Oh, and I say, no, it's not cheating. When you're making a painting on your computer, it's the same as when you're making a painting with real paint. It's just that instead of getting your hands dirty, you're just using a pen, because it's all about visual relationships and colors and forms. And so.
But it's interesting. You formed an aesthetic early on. You said watercolor, and you went to art school. Where were you seeing art and said, that's what I want to pursue?
Oh, I see what you mean. I grew up, my parents were both very cultured, and we had art books around the house. My dad loved music. He listened to Saturday afternoon at the Metropolitan Opera. Every Saturday, the opera was on.
I see. Yeah.
And my mother encouraged me. My mother was a very intelligent person. She did a BA in English literature, and so she had all her poetry books all over the house and stuff, and lots of literature, theater.
So now your art form is, for maybe the last 10 years, are YouTube videos that last 8 to 10 minutes, say?
Yeah. Or something like that, or 15 minutes sometimes. Yeah. But yeah. Or 3-4 minutes, whatever.
Right, somewhere in that 3 to 13 minutes, let's say. Yeah. Okay, so a screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're making one of your experimental videos?
I have to know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And what I'm doing is I'm going to work with music, graphics, cameras, video cameras, and software. And my intention is to have fun and see what happens.
Wow, that's my favorite. That's because musicians say, "I'm going to play." I always say that's why Walter Pater said all art aspires to the condition of music. It's like painting, poetry, architecture, sculpture, all wishes it could be as cool as music because you play it. You
Mhm.
know, I think fun and play. In fact, I asked Marshall McLuhan's son Eric once if you had to, summarize everything in a word. He said playground. I says, what about your dad? He said, same word, playground. It was funny.
Yeah.
So I was going to follow that up was Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your viewer, your audience, when you're making your video?
I It's a game. So I know up front that given the algorithms and given the reality that only people who constantly promote themselves 24/7 are going to have a huge following. So, and I'm not willing to do that. So I accept that I have a very small following. And, but at the same time, it's a game. I learned this when I was doing radio. I started with Doug Harvey. I was part of his radio show back in 1987 or something like that. I was part of his little radio thing, and I would tell stories and do text. I would do text sound when I was with him, and then started doing stories in things like bistros and stuff in Montreal. And I would think about a game, try to get them to react. What, like rhetoric, like what are the tools of telling a story that are going to make people stop talking and listen to you? And that's a game, and for me, the most rewarding thing ever was when I was telling a story on a Sunday night in a bar in Montreal, and suddenly it's quiet. Everybody's listening to me, and I thought, "Holy shit, they're actually listening to me. They're digging my story," and that's such an amazing thing. And then you try to think, okay, what was it in my story that got them to listen? And then so that's how you learn your craft of storytelling.
Really good. McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness, like a human sensorium. Knife and fork extends our teeth. The shutter in a camera or a projector extends our eyelid. Maybe even non-tangible, say religion, philosophy extends consciousness. What does the video extend for you? What humanness does video extend for you?
While motion, the idea of theater, like people moving around, which is
Yeah.
related to dance as well.
Yeah.
And action. The idea of a story, something's going to happen. Somebody comes in. What's this person going to do? What are they going to do to each other? Of course, I'm unfortunately have no actors, so it's all a one-man show.
Yeah.
So I just have to, whatever.
Oh, by the way, when you brought up Doug Harvey's radio show, I think I was on it. I was on his radio show once, and I went to a studio like in Chinatown in LA.
Okay.
Was that where he was broadcasting from for that radio show, or that was just?
Oh, that's Manlisher Carcano. We've been doing that for a long time. But the first show I did with him was called Subfrag, and I forget what university it was or what it was with, but he had a little radio thing in Winnipeg, and that's where I started with him.
I see.
And apparently Doug told me he'd been doing since he was very young in Edmonton. When he lived in Edmonton, he had a little radio thing, so that was his passion. And then because I was his friend, I got invited in, and that's how.
Yeah. No, radio is one of my favorite mediums. I listen to radio all the time, and I don't even like to listen online so much. I like to feel like it's a live experience, not taped. Like you can listen in the archives. I don't like that so much. That was good. McLuhan said film or video extends your foot. Because most people say or eyes or memory, but I like that you said motion, dance, theater, action. Peter Greenaway said cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. Our our experimental filmmakers, video makers telling stories a different way or doing something completely different. Like, or if me or you watch Tony Conrad's The Flicker, it's just black and white flickering on and off for 15 minutes. We might have a story go through our heads, but it's not storytelling per se.
No.
So your discussion on that regard, because you've emphasized storytelling and narrative a lot, but what's your take on these people who are doing, like, in the tradition of the experimental filmmakers, structuralist filmmakers, more abstract?
Well, my heart is more with the abstract stuff because, like, when I was at art school, I was doing abstract expressionist art. I like the idea of just throwing paint around and not having anything it represent anything, just creating a surface. And I love that. I love to be able to do that, but I'm afraid that if I just did, well, maybe I should do it just as an experiment, as an exercise, do a YouTube video like that. But I'm just afraid nobody would look at it, or, like, nobody would respond. But yeah, some of my videos are just basically collages of me walking around and whatever, what I see, cars going by and people getting on the transit bus or going on the metro. There's no real story there. It's just a collage. So I do a variety of stuff, but I say story because I like, it's playful. People love stories. I view stories the way a kid views having a bedtime story.
Yep. It's very interesting, and it relates to James Joyce again, because I think we all learn what reading Finnegan's Wake is when we're read books aloud as a kid and we don't know how to read yet, but
Yeah.
we're looking at these black and white sigla on a page, symbols, letters, and our parents are reading to us aloud, because essentially the Wake is about reading it aloud with a group of people. But before we get into the Wake, we're almost there. I was going to ask you this, Michael Apted. I asked him 40 years ago, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? And most people don't know, Abel Gance invented rapid montage in 1922 in Paris, but it really flourished in the 80s with MTV. And Marty Scorsese said, I cut my films faster because of MTV. And so Michael Apted said, because we've learned to take in information faster. So I asked this question with the bias. Can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
The brain is a surprising organ. And I wouldn't put it past the brain to be able to capture a whole story within the snap of a finger, just like William Blake said, to see a universe in a grain of sand.
That's good. Yeah, good example. But is it literally possible for humans to multitask?
This is something I'm not completely, I haven't done any research, so my knowledge of that is superficial. But from my understanding, it may seem we're multitasking, but each time we're doing one thing at a time in a sequence. It may be a rapid sequence to give the impression we're doing a whole bunch of things. But when you reach for your coffee, you're making sure that you don't spill your coffee at the same time as you're talking on the phone. So so I think we focus on one activity, even though it's so fast, like the little squares of a film strip creating motion, but it's actually static instants occurring, and we're paying attention to one thing, but we're not actually multitasking.
Yeah, that's interesting, because Andrew Norn, the experimental filmmaker, said if you put one frame after another frame, that is narrative, that is storytelling. Even if it's abstract gobbledygook on each frame, it's still this narrative, linear kind of line.
Yeah.
They love to call it time-based medium. But I'm curious what informed your framing aesthetic, how you frame, because like both of us literally came to this live TV event we're in right now, and we framed ourselves in the middle, a traditional framing, and you make experimental videos for 10 years. How did you form the aesthetic on how to frame things? What informed your aesthetic, how to frame?
I learned that from doing oil painting, from painting and making paintings. Yeah. So putting things on the canvas so that controlling the movement of the eye across the forms on the canvas is similar to when you frame your video. You want to control where does the eye go. Like here, I just noticed I should have sat down. I didn't know what it was going to look like when I was on this streaming thing, but like, look at all this garbage in the background. If I was doing a video, look at that, all this distracting stuff in the background. I would have like tried to have either a straight black backdrop, you know what I mean? I would have spent some time to arrange what's behind me, but it's okay.
No, actually, I have more distractions. You have a good framing. It's pretty much solid. So, what do you think the motive of the cave artist is? Your hunch or your guess? What was their motive?
I think that it's an innate inner experience, a mystical connection. Since this was the days, in the cave days, they didn't have science and biology and physics and chemistry. So the world was like a huge, mysterious event. And that's why back in cave days and old days, they had spirits. Like there was a spirit in all things. And so a spirit in the rock, trees, everything, animals, and so there's maybe sympathetic magic. If they want to go hunting, they draw a picture of the animal that they're hoping to catch in order to feed the family, and so it's a whole complex thing. There's the enjoyment of making the image. Then there's the kind of prayer aspect of aspiring to catch an animal. And then there's maybe the mystical thing, maybe the mojo, the good luck.
That is good, especially with Mojo Nixon just dying. Mojo, what a word. I love that word. Sometimes people say the motive of the cave artist was to preserve, like record, show their legacy. So I wanted to go into the word archive with you. In 1400s, the word archive came from meaning keep safe from harm. 200 years later, 1600s, is what we kind of think archives are, a record preserved as evidence. But the two questions I'm going to ask you after I set it up are, is archiving more innate or more invented? And do you have plans for your own archive? But, the word archive comes from this town hall, Greek, public building, and the flip is kind of the Zen Eastern philosophy approach, be here now, like Ram Dass,
Yeah.
live in the moment.
Yeah.
And Wyndham Lewis even said, artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. So I'm curious your thoughts on this, because why should we archive? And believe me, I love our libraries. I go to one every day. And I think they're important, but I also believe that the futurists saying destroy all libraries and museums is a valid point. What is your feeling on this act of archiving? Is it more innate or more invented by humans to archive? Because like the Egyptians would put stuff in the coffin with them themselves.
I think that's the answer. The Egyptians put stuff in the coffin, indicates that it's an innate impulse.
Yeah.
Because it creates a sense of security and continuity and predictability. It reduces anxiety of the unknown. The unknown creates anxiety and fear. And the more you create these little ritual structures, like collecting things or putting things in the coffin, sing. And of course there's the oral tradition of there are people apparently in the old days, the time of Homer, people had amazing memories. Homer could recite the 400 pages of an epic from his head, and that's no bullshit. He could actually do it, whereas now we don't have to have that memory kind of thing. So memory was the first archive, I guess, the oral tradition, and people were illiterate, so whatever, and manuscripts were hard to come by before the printing press. So a scholar might have in his collection 5 manuscripts and that's it, and this is a university scholar before the, so.
Amazing. So do you have any plans for your own archives? You've collected your art over the years. Is there any plan for your own?
Not really. I keep it purely for my own sanity and well-being. It creates a sense of happiness for me to have this little nest. I'm like a bird and I need a nest in order to feel comfortable, because I have it in perspective because I've been through so much upheaval in my life, because I'm an eccentric person and had to move and had to throw my stuff in the garbage so many times. I came up with a digestive model that, you're sailing along and suddenly you discover, divorce number 1. Okay, everything's got to go in the dumpster. And then where am I going to go? I'm going to move halfway across the continent. I'm going to go live somewhere else for a while. And then, so you start accumulating more stuff. And then I went to a meditation center, and then I went to Halifax, and then started creating another huge collection of paintings and things. And then suddenly, I'm in love. I got to go to Montreal. And then a whole dumpster load of stuff disappears, and I end up, and then you get divorced again, and same thing. I had fun watching people collecting my library. I just put it in boxes in front of my window and had joy watching people who really were delighted to see the books that I was putting out for them, and here I am now. I have a new collection. And then I went to the Arctic for 6 years. And so I came back and started again. And now I'm surrounded with a wealth of musical instruments and books and things. Yeah, I've been doing video. Yeah, video. I started my doing video in 2007, I think it was. Because my first video project was when I went with my students on a fishing and hunting expeditions. We did 4 of them with snowmobiles and stuff like that.
Wow, that's pretty heavy. So what's more important, conviction or compromise?
Well, it depends what type of compromise and what kind of conviction. There's a dangerous conviction, which is fanatical dogma. And so I'm allergic to that. The only thing I'm convinced or have conviction about is I know how to tie my shoe. Yeah. And in terms of what was the other one you said?
Conviction or compromise?
Compromise. You definitely have to be flexible, and you have to know when to not speak out, when to speak, and when to keep quiet. Like but I wouldn't compromise my values. Like if someone says to do something cruel or nasty, I would not compromise on that. I would outright refuse.
Yeah. And John, you've accomplished, in your accomplishments, in your creative accomplishments, how do you rate these 3 elements overall? Luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
I guess skill is number 1 because I always had an aptitude for it. And I did well at art school. I got really good grades. I got scholarships. I got to go to graduate school for free, so I did really well. And luck, I suppose I was lucky enough to be born into a household where art was valued. And through going to art school, I met nice people like Doug Harvey. And what was the third one?
Ambition.
Yeah, my ambition was just to do what I feel is important to do. But I know I'm not going to beat my head against the wall if it's going to drain promoting myself is going to drain my energy and kill my creative drive and make me feel depressed. So my ambition is to maintain a discipline and to create.
Beautiful. You know, another Canadian, Leonard Cohen, said the only way you can sell a concert is if you put yourself at risk. And if you don't do that, people know. What role does risk taking play in your creative process?
Well, every time you do something, you know that somebody might get angry at what you're doing. Well, just for fun, I did a series of experiments in my undergrad art school of doing shopping mall exhibits. I had a pickup truck, so I put together some little portable wooden stands on which and with plywood so that students could hang their pictures. And then a group of us, we did it a few times, went to shopping malls. And then we actually did a procession where we all carried, instead of carrying protest signs, we carried artworks. And the idea was that don't accuse art of being some niche activity. Art will come to the people. You don't have to go to the art gallery. The art gallery is going to come to you, the people.
Nice.
And that was taking a risk because, especially one of the shopping mall exhibits, the aggression that we provoked was astonishing. We actually had civilized people coming out of their shops and telling us that we were assholes.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Talk about not having a sense of humor, or saying, "Oh yeah, you guys, you could just, my kid could do better," or "Oh, you just smoke a joint and go wild. That's all you got to do to make art. You just, you just get stoned and you just like a chimpanzee, like what the hell? Don't you know that we're trying to bring some joy and variety to this dreary shopping mall environment, and a little bit of spice, and this is your reaction?" It's like, holy smokes. So you're putting yourself at risk when you go out and show what you're doing.
Wow. You really illustrated that well in words. I really got a picture of that. Thank you, John. T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
It's in words, in English language. I sometimes think in French, but mostly in English.
But
And
more so metaphorically, what form is your inner consciousness in?
I lie there and I have visual pictures going through my head, memories of being in different places, and then there's a narrator that is part of the theater. So maybe memory is like a piece of theater or like a movie. And in the movie, there are long periods where the camera is just moving, and then sometimes a voice, there'll be a narrator.
Yeah. Two of my film heroes have this mantra. George Manupelli, who's from Canada, he started the Ann Arbor Film Festival over 60 years ago. He says, ignore yourself. Jonas Meekis's is there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
I think it's a vehicle. That personality is an obstacle that has to be overcome if you want to be truly creative, because personality, meaning putting your ego first and trying to express yourself, can be creative block, and you're not satisfied because you have an idea, a preconceived notion, and you're trying to prove something. Whereas if you just, as a Zen saying, you put yourself in the proper place. You set up your studio or your art supplies or whatever it is. You got all your equipment and gear, and then you just do it. And you're not there to express yourself. You're there because you're in the proper place and you're doing it.
Yeah. Can art making be egoless?
Yeah, well, yeah, egoless is, are we ever egoless? I think it depends. Ego is a complex word. There's awareness. There's always awareness, but awareness is different. Ego, yeah, it's so there's there's a sense of identity. There's identity, meaning like all the stuff that's on your driver's license and your personal data. That's your identity, and your ego. I like the idea. It's a sense of self. It's like a software program that we all have it. It's all identical. It's just the contents of everyone's ego is different. So
Yeah.
that's yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the word identity. Both Krishnamurti and McLuhan said violence is the human search for identity. I'm curious your thought on that.
I don't think violence is necessary. Uh, Violence, yeah. Why would you want to be violent? I guess you would. My guess is that a person gets violent. Well, if I had a temper, I was really, really frustrated because something's not going the way it's supposed to. You might get mad and say, "Ah," and throw a glass at the wall or smash a beer bottle or something, But uh, no, I'm not.
Well,
I don't like violence.
yeah, neither do I. I'm anti-violent. I'm a pacifist, but fill in the blank, John. Anger can be a productive emotion when
you learn how to manage it
yeah,
rather than acting it out
yeah,
and wallowing in it and making it into like a self-centered display.
yeah. Really good. Is perception reality?
Perception is your reading of reality.
Yeah.
I like the line in Ulysses, the Proteus episode of Stephen Dedalus saying, "Signatures of things are here for me to read." So
Yeah.
your perceptions are you just reading whatever is coming into your sense organs and processing it and how and what you notice. Okay, it's a complicated. I won't get it. It's complex. Yeah.
Well, finally, we can get into Joyce. That was beautiful. You have ESP because that was the next question. McLuhan probed Finnegan's Wake, saying, artists dream awake. Everybody has this power to create these scenarios in the middle of the night and dream.
Yeah.
And artists can, not to sound elitist, but artists can also dream awake. Have dreams played a role in your creative process?
Yeah. I've always been into dreaming. When I'm relaxed, I enjoy lucid dreaming. I used to do lucid dreaming. I used to keep a dream journey years ago. But when I'm anxious, like lately, I suffer a lot of survival anxiety because the state of the world and all these horrific things happening creates anxiety. So then dreams don't go so well because I wake up like, oh my God, I'm in the world again. What's going to happen,
Yeah.
But if I'm totally relaxed and I feel safe and secure, then dreams can be very enjoyable journeys, and you can do lucid dream. You're in the middle of some claustrophobic thing, someone's chasing you, and then you realize, oh, this is a dream. Let's turn this person into a flower. And you're walking through a botanical garden, and then you're going to go down to the ocean and relax and walk in the sand as the water's washing over your feet and look towards the horizon.
Beautiful. So, tell us your history of James Joyce. You said at about 16 or 17, you were reading Portrait. Is that what you started with?
I jumped into the deep end with Ulysses when I was around that age, and it was
And
very,
was
very.
that through school? They were requiring it, or you read Joyce on your own?
I read it on my own. I
And
always
what,
made a point of not taking a course on stuff that I truly love because studying it academically would kill the pleasure.
right. So you mean you started with Ulysses, not Portrait?
Yeah, well, I started with the Ulysses, and it was I didn't get too far, so then I read Dubliners. I thought, okay, let's go back to the beginning, and this is too heavy duty just to jump in cold turkey. And then there was this Richard Ellman book at the time that would help you understand where Ulysses is coming from.
Yeah.
So I started with Dubliners, and I read all of those, and then Richard Ellman's book on Joyce, and then I started to get a handle on Ulysses. And
What age did you start the Wake on?
maybe when I was about 19 or 20.
And so did you read it out loud with a group of people? How did you approach the Wake? And have you done it all these years, or what's
Yeah,
your
I read it all these years. I still read it.
out loud or by yourself
Now I
quietly?
read it. I do it out loud because yeah, and I do it by myself because I'm kind of a solitary person. I'm a hermit by nature, I guess. My parents
Yeah.
used to call me the hermit, and I'm still alone. And I spend 90% of my time alone. So I've never been with a reading group. I don't know anyone else. Other You're the first person I met face to face who's read Finnegan's Wake. So other than you, I don't know anyone else who's read Finnegan's Wake cover to cover.
Have you ever read any of the books trying to explain Finnegan's Wake?
Oh yeah,
Besides,
yeah. Right from the start. Again, well, first I should say I would advise anyone, don't even touch Finnegan's Wake until you have a good understanding of Ulysses and Dubliners and Portrait, and then you have enough background information. If you can enjoy Ulysses, you know how the stream of consciousness and all these multiple associations work, and then you're ready for Finnegan's Wake. And I started with the Skeleton Key, the classic book.
yeah,
But then
King.
I got that sort of made it not so much fun sometimes, because so then I would just read it without read a page at a time and not even understand it. And then I remember when I was working as addictions counselor before work, I would go to the library, and there was the James Joyce Quarterly, or the Wake Letter. There was something
Yeah,
called that.
yeah.
So that helped me a lot, reading a Wake Letter, and there was, I remember reading a little essay in there on how to read Finnegan's Wake and just recognize the sentence structure. Even if you don't know what's going on, it's got a subject, a verb, an object, and then you're reading it out loud, and you get an idea of being with a group of people, like falling asleep in a lounge, listening to people speaking Portuguese. You sort of have an idea, the vibes and what's going on.
That's a great word, vibes, because T.S. Eliot said poetry can communicate before it's understood.
Yeah.
I think that's what scares people. They think they're supposed to understand the wake. No, it can communicate a lot to you, especially if you read out loud. But let's go through a couple of Joyce's lines. What does epiphanies and everydayness mean to you? This is something he talks about.
Yeah, that's something I don't fully understand because I've never taken the time to actually research that, but it's on my list of things to research. But epiphany is like a moment where something trigger everything. It's a magical moment where all these different threads that are going through your head suddenly is like, okay, it all comes together in this moment, and it feels perfect, and it feels right, and it gives you a sense of almost like a mystical feeling. There's kind of mysticism in James Joyce writing, and it's sort of like a mystical experience of you're in there, and suddenly it's like you have this panoramic expanse, like standing on like a like a looking like a romantic painting by Friedrich or whatever, and this guy standing on a cliff gazing into the
Yeah.
cosmos.
Or looking at the Grand Canyon or
Yeah,
something.
looking at the Grand Canyon.
An aha moment.
Yeah,
But there's another three words in portrait. I'm always curious what people think: silence, exile, and cunning. You ever have any feelings on those three words that Joyce brought up?
silence, exile.
Exile and cunning.
Uh, well, you have to be silent in order to allow space for things to occur. And cunning is your way of navigating through the traumatic existence. There's poverty and hardship is interwoven in all the writing of Joyce, and the idea of oppression from the English colonization and St. Patrick coming to fight the Druid and put Catholicism and the sexual uptightness. And so cunning, silence, and what was the third one?
Exile.
Exile. Of course, Joyce was in exile, and you have to leave your familiar little world. Otherwise, like he starts out Dubliners with the idea of paralysis, because they're all trapped in this world, and in order to escape the paralysis, you have to leave. You go into exile. So he exiled himself to a wonderful place: Paris, Zurich, Trieste.
Oh, yeah. So another person who influenced Joyce, Lewis Carroll, says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
I think impossible things, but I don't believe them because they're impossible.
There you go. Well, that's like Sunra said, the impossible attracts me because everything possible has been done and the world didn't change.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, John, tell me one major element of your creativeness that stayed the same and one major element that's changed in the many years you've been being creative.
Well, the major element that is a greater confidence in what I'm doing, because when you're young and people are yelling at you all the time and being pissed off at you because you're not working 9 to 5, you're not on the treadmill, you're different. And so I developed confidence to not let that discourage me anymore.
Yeah.
And what was the thing?
Well, one thing that stayed the same and one thing that's changed.
Well, the one thing that stayed the same was my sense of discipline and joy. I find creativity is a joyful experience.
Great.
The happiest moments are when I'm creating.
Hello. Beautiful. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Well, I guess I can turn my anxiety and depression and negativity into philosophical research investigation. Again, my mentor for that would be Samuel Beckett. He's
Yeah.
obviously I don't have to elaborate on that. And then Camus' famous opening to the myth of Sisyphus, the first question of philosophy is whether or not to commit suicide. So that's a question of turning this sense that life, I often feel that life is basically a trauma. Given the world, especially what's going on, it's just a trauma just to exist and have to survive. And so this is like a little electric shocks to your brain, finding a way to cope. And that can be grist for the mill to help you be creative. You digest it and you dig deeper rather than be. If you're living a satiated life, you could be quite superficial. But if you're constantly being poked and jabbed, that enables you to go deeper.
It's good. John, what you said really anticipated the next question. Thank you. You create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait morphed it into you are what you hate. In fact, James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated in the religion in which you say you disbelieve. Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
So there's mainly I'm curious your thoughts. You create what you resist. And I'm not saying you, one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
That's interesting. You create what you resist. I don't know what I'm resisting. I honestly,
Yeah.
I really don't know. What am I resisting? What does it mean to resist? It means you don't want to do things. I resist getting sucked into the materialist view of working 9 to 5 and being alienated from life itself just because I need to pay the rent and buy groceries. I resist that.
Well, it's funny because I often ask people where they got their work ethic and they go, their parents. I mean, most everybody said their parents. And if you look up work ethic in Wikipedia, about the third paragraph down, it says, this could be a scam from consumer culture.
Yeah, exactly. I learned a lot from seeing the Inuit people. I lived with the Inuit up for 6 years, and they did not experience the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
I remember I was walking with a colleague one afternoon in June, maybe 2 p.m, and he says, "Look at these guys. They're not doing anything." A whole group of them. They're just standing around shooting the breeze. like in disgust, like,
Yeah.
can't you make yourself useful? Do something. Isn't this the ultimate decadence? And I said, no, that's the ultimate joy of life. That why?
That's the ultimate joy of life. Exactly. That's the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, work's a scam, then. Come on, we know that.
And I
And
always say that that making pictures and making videos is bloody hard work because you have to
it,
master the craft and you have to be so disciplined. And
yeah,
sometimes it's so like really requires a lot of attention to
but
detail.
John, you also stressed early on the word play and
Yeah.
having fun.
Yes,
You know,
exactly. Exactly.
so
That's
that's Duchamp. Get your life and your job as mixed up as possible. It's not like, okay, I worked all day, now I can go home and play and be a painter, and now I got to go work all day. No, yeah. So I asked my friend who wrote comedy, can satire be destructive? And he goes, that's the job of satire. But if me or you do a certain cartoon in a certain country and they kill us, some people think death is destructive. Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own.
mhm.
What's the function of satire?
Well, maybe satire originally was like in the say in the plays of Shakespeare, the jester would be able to say things to the king that no one else would dare say, or they'd have their head cut off. So the
Yeah,
jester could actually tell the truth through his jests. But then again, in some of the plays, the king gets mad and says, and it threatens the jester. So the jester is walking a fine line. But so satire, and even in a totalitarian regime, you could be very, very subtle, and people would pick up certain messages in what you were referring to or how you're talking about things, and they would get it maybe.
how do you find peace of mind?
Well, being in nature is very powerful, but uh, I don't have a car or anything. So in the past few years, nature has been relaxing in a park. And Montreal is a beautiful city. I could go down and sit by the water. It's got a beautiful waterfront. So just peace of mind is feeling connected to wherever you are and letting go and just letting go of your worry and all your hopes
Good,
and fears.
really good. What's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
Well, again, I have two daughters, and I don't want to. They would if I say the wrong thing, I'm going to get in trouble. But um, they're more definitely they cry easier. I got. I'm always impressed by how easily a woman will cry, as opposed to a guy who won't cry. And I don't know if that's learned but then again, they'll admit that it's hormones. So women has their period and they have all kinds of hormone rushes
Yeah,
my daughters are lucid and about it. They don't bullshit me. They say, yeah, I'm having my hormones, and I'm
yeah,
just leave me alone. You're getting on my nerves. Get away from me. Like
yeah. Yeah, my mom taught me crying is healthy in two ways, not just release of emotion or tension, but also it's getting toxins out of your body. The
yeah,
tears have these things. So these are 5 quick questions from Alan Watts off the top of your head in just a couple words. One, who started it all?
I don't know.
Two, are we going to make it?
Good question.
Three, where do we put it?
In your heart.
That is the best answer I ever get. I always want people to say in your heart. Thank you for saying that. Four, who's cleaning it up?
Molecules and atoms.
Five, is it serious?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's another great Zappa line. I'm very serious about being not serious.
Mhm.
Okay, if you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I would say be clear about what you're going to do with your life. Don't try to be normal. Don't try to be straight. I like that song by the Specials. I want to be straight. I want to be straight. I'm tired of taking drugs and taking up late. I'm gonna be straight. I would say, don't do that.
Yeah.
You're not straight. You're not a straight person. Not sexually. I'm talking just in terms of your being and your vibrations. Go
Yeah.
for it. Go
Yeah.
for it. Don't try to be normal, because it's not going to work, because you're going to get fired from your job. You're going to get divorced. Every time you try to be normal, it's going to explode in your face. So don't try to be normal.
Wow. Should toilet paper come off the roll over or under?
I don't use toilet paper. I jump in the shower because I don't like the idea of forest being cut down to wipe my ass.
Very good. If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
The Moranovian way.
What's that word mean?
Moranovian way.
I know.
Moranovian is a word that I invented because I invented Club Morano, because people used to say, oh, where are you from and what are you doing? And I said, well, I work at Club Morano, and it's from the word moron.
Oh, moron is the root word. That is good.
Yeah, so yes, exactly.
And what is Lohbado's roots? What is that word from?
It happened when there's a story that goes with it. It means literally the one who drools through his beard.
Oh, drools through beard. That's good.
And it happened when I was coming down from the Arctic at Christmas. I had a good rapport with my ex-wife, and so every time my daughter would be there at the airport, and the shock of going from the Arctic, it's like a northern Sahara desert of complete spaciousness and very little sense stimulation. Well, very quiet, to suddenly being standing at a metro stop with a roar of a train and crowds of people. And it felt like being on a psychedelic experience. It just felt, I burst out laughing. And then my daughter got annoyed and said, why are you laughing? And I just said, Lohbado.
That is good. It's Finneganese. It's a made up word, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Michael Silverblatt, I love his line. What do you think of Finnegan's Wake? He says, there's a typo in every word on purpose.
Okay. That's a good one.
Now, they want to scent the glue in the binding of your autobiography. What would the smell be?
It would smell like a rose.
If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed, and what would it be made of?
It would be plant a nice flower in the botanical gardens, and then one that keeps coming up every year.
Nice. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
To be a billionaire. I don't want to be a billionaire, and there's no way I'm ever going to be a billionaire, because I see what it does to people. This idea of buying lottery tickets is absurd.
It's the answer I get the most. Money, fame, and heroin.
Okay.
If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I would try to put my mind elsewhere in order to, I would do visualization.
That is a great answer. I've never had that answer. Let's talk about music for a second here. We're almost done. And John, I want to thank you. This has been really fun. And my friend says the 3 T's of music are technique, theory, and taste. So you learned the technique, how to play classical music. You learned the theory, the structure. How does one acquire taste?
Well, taste is kind of an art. It's like once you master the craft, like how to read music and all the stuff that goes into making music, it's like a cook in the kitchen. You learn where all the spices are, and the proper way to cook a meal. But the taste comes in with the sense, you got to be in tune with it, sort of connected, because there are people who can sit down and rattle off really technically perfect Beethoven piano sonata, but it's kind of dead. Whereas there's a famous piano interpreter of the piano music of Chopin, but he was famous for making mistakes, but his performances were so full of passion that that's why we listened to them.
Who was that? You remember his name?
I wish I could remember if he was from Poland, you know,
Okay. Yeah,
in the
that's good.
middle of the 20th century, you know, the 30s, 40s, like 78 records kind of thing.
But was your Canadian dude Glenn Gould ever making mistakes? He was a heavy dude too, playing music, right?
Yeah, he was a nightmare for the recording engineer. Him in his rocking chair and humming away.
Yeah, he was an associate of McLuhan's too.
Okay.
So here's Marshall using that word taste in music. I'm curious your response to this line. Song is slow down speech. The reason cultures have different musical taste is ultimately connected to language difference. Any comment?
That's true. I live in one of the most multicultural neighborhoods in Canada, Côte de Neige. This is the immigrant drop-off center. So I hear every day tons and tons of different languages. And I have often thought that something in the language of, say, East Indian or Pakistani sort of goes along with this kind of sitar type music. I don't know. That's a superficial observation, but I suppose, yeah.
Yeah.
And the German music is full of consonants, and
Yeah.
so then you get the more so brassy Wagner and Beethoven, the big huge bombast, and Italian is more like musical language, and so you have Puccini and stuff like that,
No, that's
Monteverdi.
but you illustrated it well with many examples. What's more fundamental, language or music?
I think music is, oh geez, that's, I can't say. I don't. They're both go together because music is like an instant inner response, and you just start singing and making music. But then language, I like the Derrida's Grammatology. It was a comical book to read. He talked about the origin of language, and he said the first vowels were love, wanting to, I love you, I want, want to seduce somebody and fall in love. And then the other word was help, cry for help, the consonants. So those seem to come right from the beginning. The need for another person, either because you want them, because you love them, or because you're crying for help. I need help. I'm in danger. So which
Really
comes
good.
first, language or music? They both, when you're crying for help, that's almost like could be a part of a musical performance too.
Very good. Taught me a lot there, John. I appreciate that. And tell me an instrumental that makes you laugh.
Well, I burst out laughing the first time I heard live Berlioz's Symphony Fantastique. There was parts in there where the brass was coming in towards the end. It sounded like somebody farting, and I burst out laughing.
That's good. Yeah, my friend Timothy Carey was in John Cassavetes, Kubrick films, and Zappa scored his first film, The World's Greatest Sinner. He has this great line: "Live long, live healthier, let thy arse make wind."
There you go, eh?
What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
I like the cultural shift of using technology, of using software and electronic musical instruments is exciting. It's beautiful. I love synthesizers and things. It's just joyful and enjoyment. I don't believe these dogmatic people who think that it's, if you're playing a drum machine, you're cheating. I say, no, there's no competition. Absolutely none. They're two
Yeah.
different things, and each
No,
has,
I
yeah,
I met the guy who invented the bumper sticker, "Drum machines have no soul." And
that's false.
I said, "Dude, that's like saying a chair has no soul."
Yeah.
What you're trying to say is that according to my aesthetic, the way some people use drum machines has no soul. And he
Uh-huh.
goes, "That's too long for a bumper sticker."
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, that's a good one.
Um, what's a question that remains unresolved for you?
Why is existence happening?
Yeah.
would make more sense for it to not be happening because entails so much suffering.
How has making art shaped your behavior?
It's made me more completely open-minded, a sense of humor, and I try to be friendly and non-judgmental. I try to have empathy and understanding rather than clobbering people with moralistic reactions.
Yeah, very good. Thornton Wilder said in 1928, art is confession, art is the secret told, but art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. John, you've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Well, if you're writing a story, for example, it's a way of processing your experience, the bewilderment, the confusion, the emotion. You're processing it. And the trick is you're not writing about people you know. It's just you've digested everything that you've experienced and it's coming out in imagination, in imaginative forms. And if I'm playing my synthesizer, I can express my sorrow, grieving about someone who died. I can present that through playing my music or make a picture, the same thing, do a calligraphy.
Well, because you said that, I'm going to throw in a bonus question if you don't mind, because we got one more question after that, and that is McLuhan said everybody experiences far more than they understand. Yet it is experience rather than understanding that influences behavior. Now, these are two words you've used. Early on, you used the word understanding and you used the word experience. The way I interpret that McLuhan line is if the kid comes in from the cold, the parent can go, don't touch the stove, it will burn your hand. That's experience. Understanding is, oh, you can get your hands really close to the stove and rub them together. And the parent is teaching the kid the dynamics of heat.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I'm interpreting McLuhan's line right, but what I think he's saying is that experience shapes our behavior when understanding should more shape our behavior. What do you think of that?
I
You
think
know,
I
go
think
ahead.
they both go together. You
Yeah.
experience something, and your first reaction, what was that? And then you reflect on it and you begin to understand. So you say, why did my mother yell at me to not touch the stove?
Yeah.
And then you think a moment, because she cares about me, she loves me, and she doesn't want me to get hurt.
Yeah.
And I understand that I'll have a really bad blister and maybe even have to go to emergency if I touch the stove.
Yeah.
So that's the understanding that comes after the experience.
Yeah. And then back to Alan Turing, he says, what we want in a machine, what we want is a machine that can learn from experience. With AI playing this big role, I don't know if you've messed around with chatbox or AI making art, but what's your take on that line from Turing? What we want is a machine that can learn from experience.
AI, my only limited is experiences with Photoshop. It's just another tool that don't turn it into some big grandiose thing, because maybe it'll never reach grandiose sci-fi perspectives like in 2001 Space Odyssey with the computer HAL. I don't think we'll ever reach that level. It's more like, okay, I'm in Photoshop and I want to change the sky, and you write or I want to make a picture with elephants, so you type the word elephant and then you got a whole
Yeah.
set of pictures to choose from as the basis of your painting, and you do manipulate it and whatever. I use it mostly for sky right now, but I am thinking of playing with AI on Photoshop. Yeah.
Did you use DALI yet or Mid Journey? Have you used
No,
either
I
of
haven't. I just use whatever is available. I shouldn't. I log into my daughter's Photoshop account. That's how I get in there.
them?
So I only use whatever I'm able to get into, and all my other software is like Affinity, which is I bought the whole Affinity suite several years ago. It's like a clone of Adobe, but it's like $30 for
Yeah.
say their Affinity Designer, as opposed to paying $500 a year to subscribe to Illustrator. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. One more is Mike Kelly said, making art is making your problems other people's problems. Any thought on that quote?
I guess that's part of empathy and understanding. Like I read the last book I read was A Black Boy by Richard Wright, about his problems growing up in a segregated community and what's it like when you're discovering racism and discovering how much white people hate you, and what it does to your soul and your whole way of being. The fact that you're physically in danger. At first, you're wondering, why is it that all the adults are telling me to shut up and don't go there and don't do this? And then suddenly he ventures out, and suddenly he experiences the violence and the horror. So his situation is educating me about something that I wouldn't otherwise know about. And then
Yeah.
it becomes my problem too, that how can I live with this on my conscience, that my fellow Caucasians are treating other races this way.
Wow. Here's another one, poet Fanny Howe. I never get what this is, but I'm curious your take. The point of art is to show people that life is worth living by showing that it isn't. What what does that mean to you, or how do you take that one?
Well, I've experienced a lot of suicides, best friends, so I never talk about life is not worth living, because I've been in the position of having to offer encouragement to people. I even worked a suicide line when I was young, and so but it's important to be honest about suffering and negative. So you can be honest about pain and tell the truth about what's happening without saying life is not worth living. And Beckett, of course, is an expert at dealing with melancholy, and maybe because he experienced World War II, he has a wild, wicked sense of humor that makes it. I don't get the sense that. Yeah, anyway, so I don't. I'm not an expert, but
No, Beckett's heavy. I've argued with Zizek before because he thinks Beckett's better than Joyce.
no, I wouldn't
And
say that.
it's
But
it's
yeah,
it's sort of like to be counterculturally correct. You're supposed to say Beefheart's better than Zappa and Beckett's better than Joyce. It's like they're all good. It's just a question of what give and take, whatever.
I like them all.
Yeah, but how about Louis Buñuel said, "I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it."
Yeah, there's nothing more boring than a person who figures they found God, or they found the truth, or
Yeah,
they figured it out, they know it now, and then they can relax and be all pompous and self-satisfied.
but that's funny because everybody I say that to go, "Oh yeah, that's good," and then one guy said, "No, that's bullshit." Because if I'm going to seek something, it's because I want to find it. So I morphed it into the question: if the journey's more important than the destination, why do we have to name or seek a destination?
Well, because you need a sense of purpose or intention of what you're doing. Otherwise, you just flow all over the place like spilled milk on the table, like a kid spilling their glass of milk. So you need a sense of purpose. So my purpose might be, I find life is very painful and I want to make sense of things. I want to find a way to cope. So that's my intention. I don't know where it's going to lead me to. So it's an open intention.
But it's funny because it almost like, well, what if your purpose is to spill milk? And the flaneurs in Paris in the 20s changed art forever, psychogeography, and they just said, like Joyce, back to Joyce, epiphanies and everydayness. I just sit here and drink coffee, and I might bump into something that I have a enlightenment.
I'm totally in favor of that.
Chill out. Okay, John, the last question is, what gives you the most optimism?
The fact that there are other like-minded people, for example, being able to talk to you fills me with optimism that, you know, you're not alone. You're not the only one to feel this way. There's a lot of really good people out there. They're not all monsters like the Republican Party. You know, there's some decent people out there.
Really true. You really evoked the Captain Beefheart poem. The stars are matter, we are matter, but it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
No, it matters, and it's really been fun because the first question is, what's the best thing for a human being? Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
the last question is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. What gives you the most optimism? And he said, other people.
Well, there you go. Eh?
Yeah. So it's sure been fun spending this time with another person, especially because it was you, John. Thank you so much. This was really fun and enlightening.
Well, thank you for inviting me to chat with you.
And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends.